Her cheek was crushed against the bar wall. His arm twisted behind her back, and the whole room was watching, waiting. Ron thought she'd just learned her place. Right up until she made one quiet phone call and hung up without explaining. When the door opened and the air changed, the men pinning her realized they should have listened, and they made the biggest mistake of their lives. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. April Larson's cheek pressed against the wood-paneled wall, grain patterns cutting into her skin like tiny blades. Ron's forearm locked across her shoulders, pinning her in place with the casual brutality of someone who'd done this before. Her right arm twisted behind her back, not broken, but the angle sent white-hot pain shooting through her shoulder socket. Shouldn't have talked back. Ron's breath reeked of whiskey and arrogance, washing over her face in humid waves. His grip tightened, knuckles digging into her collarbone. Girls who work here know better than to get mouthy with paying customers. Behind him, Melvin crowded closer, his leather jacket creaking as he moved. He was shorter than Ron, stockier, with a shaved head that reflected the bar's amber lighting. His hand hovered near her waist, fingers spread wide, threatening without touching. Yet, "We're doing you a favor," Melvin said, voice pitched low enough that only April could hear. "Teaching you how things work around here, before you make a real mistake." April's eyes remained open. She didn't plead, didn't cry, didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she cataloged everything. Ron's leather jacket was worn at the elbows, expensive once but neglected now. The brass-colored watch on his wrist, fake Rolex, crystal scratched. The scar cutting through Melvin's left eyebrow, old and pale against his flushed skin. Both men smelled of cigarettes and the cheap cologne the bar kept in the bathroom for customers who came straight from work. Past them, the bar stretched out in muted amber and shadow. The bartender Leo, 40-something, balding, stood frozen behind the counter, white knuckles gripping his rag. His eyes met April's for a fraction of a second before sliding away. Not cowardice. Something else. Anticipation, maybe. 6 patrons scattered across the tables and booths. 3 deliberately looked away, studying their drinks with sudden fascination. 2 stared openly, one recording on his phone before his girlfriend hissed something and he pocketed it. The 6th, a regular April recognized from previous shifts, sat by the window. He was watching, but his eyes kept flicking toward the entrance, waiting. "Check if she's got anything on her." Ron's command cut through the bar's heavy silence. The classic rock station kept playing some Eagles song about a hotel in California, oblivious to everything happening beneath it. Melvin's hands searched her apron pockets, grabbing rather than searching. Fingers dug into fabric, invading space, asserting dominance through violation. He found her order pad, a pen, lip gloss, tossed them onto the bar where they clattered against the wood. Her phone stayed tucked in the inner pocket they missed, pressed against her ribs beneath the apron's double layer of fabric. What happened to all that attitude? Ron increased pressure on her arm until tears burned behind her eyelids, hot and unwanted. "Thought you had a lot to say 10 minutes ago. Something about not being interested? About keeping my hands to myself?" The setup had been simple. Ron had grabbed her wrist when she delivered his bourbon. Not a brush, not an accident, a grip. She'd pulled away and said clearly, loudly, "Don't touch me." He'd laughed, called her sensitive, made a joke about uptight waitresses who couldn't take a compliment. When she'd walked away without responding, Melvin had stood up, blocking her path. The escalation happened fast after that. April said nothing now. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. The bar's silence amplified everything. Ice shifting in the cooler sounded like glaciers breaking. Someone's nervous cough from the corner booth echoed like a gunshot. The neon Budweiser sign buzzed with electrical current, each pulse marking time. They didn't see her left hand slip beneath her apron's waistband. "Take her in the back," Melvin suggested, voice dropping to a register that made April's stomach clench. "Make sure the lesson really sticks. These neighborhood girls need to learn their place." Ron shoved her harder against the wall. Her forehead connected with wood, sharp pain blooming behind her eyes. "You hear that? We're being generous, giving you privacy for what comes next. Should be thanking us." April's fingers closed around her phone. The screen unlocked with her thumbprint, muscle memory bypassing conscious thought. She didn't look down, didn't need to. The number was saved under a single letter, M, first name on her contacts list. Programmed on her first shift, 3 weeks ago, when the bar's owner had handed her an apron and a warning. Behind the bar, the regulars exchanged glances. Not intervention, they'd learned that lesson already. But their stillness had weight to it. Density. They weren't watching an assault, they were watching a countdown. The man by the window shifted in his seat, leather jacket rustling. His eyes moved from April to the entrance, then back. His beer sat untouched, condensation pooling on the coaster. Waiting. April hit dial. 1 ring. The pressure on her shoulders intensified. 2 rings. Melvin's hand finally made contact with her waist, gripping hard enough to bruise. A voice answered. No greeting, no identification. Just presence, solid as stone. Manuel. Her voice stayed level despite Ron's weight crushing her ribcage, despite the pain radiating through her twisted arm, despite everything. They've got their hands on me. She didn't explain, didn't describe locations or names or circumstances. Those 4 words contained everything necessary. Click. Ron laughed, feeling her body shift as she pocketed the phone. The sound was ugly, triumphant. Oh, you called someone? Your boyfriend gonna come save you? He released her arm just enough to spin her around, forcing her to face him. His face was flushed, eyes bright with alcohol and power. Let me tell you how this works, sweetheart. The entrance door opened, not slammed, not rushed, just opened. The way doors opened when someone who owned space walked through them. The change in air pressure was immediate. Conversations that had dropped to whispers now ceased entirely. The bartender's eyes snapped toward the door, his entire body straightening. The regular by the window straightened in his seat, fear and relief warring on his weathered face. Ron didn't notice yet. He was too focused on intimidation, on April's face, on making his point. Nobody's coming to help you. Nobody who matters gives a damn about Ron. Melvin's voice cracked like thin ice. His hand dropped from April's shoulder. What? Ron didn't turn, his attention still fixed on April's face. We're not done teaching. Ron. Melvin's voice broke completely now, stripped of bravado. The color drained from his face, starting at his forehead and washing down like someone had pulled a plug. Footsteps, measured, unhurried, boot heels against worn hardwood, each step deliberate as a countdown. Not the shuffle of tired patrons or the hurried click of servers. These were the footsteps of someone who'd never rushed for anything in his life, because everything waited for him. Ron finally turned. Manuel Santana crossed the bar's threshold like he owned not just the building but the air inside it. Black leather jacket, no tie, collar open enough to show the edge of ink climbing his throat. More tattoos visible at his wrists where his sleeves were pushed back intricate patterns. April couldn't make out from this distance but had memorized from their one previous meeting. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that didn't blink, didn't scan, didn't search. They already knew everything they needed to. He didn't look at Ron or Melvin. He walked straight toward April. Ron's grip went slack. His hand fell away from her shoulder like he'd touched something burning. Melvin stepped back, hands rising instinctively, not in defense, in surrender. April sagged against the wall, catching herself before her knees could buckle. The sudden absence of pressure left her disoriented, like a wire snapped after being pulled taut. Santana stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could see the thin scar cutting through his eyebrow, the silver chain visible beneath his collar. He examined her face with clinical precision, the redness on her cheek where it had pressed against the wall, the way she cradled her right arm, the controlled breathing of someone holding back pain. Did you tell them to stop? His voice was quiet, final. Not a question seeking information but confirmation of a crime already committed. April nodded once. Her throat felt too tight for words. Santana's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture wildly. When he turned to face Ron and Melvin, his hands stayed relaxed at his sides, which somehow made him more terrifying than if he'd come in swinging. Then you chose not to listen. The words settled over the bar like snow, muffling everything beneath their weight. Ron found his voice first, though it came out strangled. Look, man, we didn't know she didn't say. She told you to stop. Santana's interruption was surgical. I heard you repeat her words. Something about not being interested, about keeping your hands to yourself. He took 1 step closer. Just 1. So you knew. You just didn't care. Melvin's hands trembled now, still raised like a suspect in a traffic stop. We were just messing around, you know? She's knew we were. Teaching her. Santana finished the sentence, voice flat. I heard that too. Interesting lesson plan. His eyes, dark, unreadable, moved between them. Tell me what you were teaching. Specifically, silence. Behind the bar, Leo had gone completely still, not even pretending to work anymore. The rag dangled from his hand. Forgotten, his face held the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to look away. The regulars sat frozen. The couple who'd been recording had their hands flat on the table, phones face down, eyes down. The three who'd looked away earlier now stared openly, no longer pretending disinterest. The man by the window had shifted his chair slightly, angling toward the exit but not leaving. Witnessing, not intervening. That's what I thought. Santana's attention returned to April. His hand moved slowly, deliberately, reaching toward her. She flinched, couldn't help it, and he froze. I'm checking your arm, he said, voice gentler but still edged with something sharp underneath. Tell me if I hurt you. He examined her wrist where Ron had twisted it, fingers light as he rotated her arm slightly. April hissed through her teeth when he found the angle that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. Dislocated? He asked. No, just pulled hard. Bruising? April looked down. Dark marks were already forming where Melvin's fingers had gripped her waist, visible above her jeans where her shirt had ridden up. She nodded. Santana's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness shifted. The air around him seemed to compress, pressure building like a storm front moving in. You're regulars here, he said, still not looking at Ron and Melvin. Statement, not question. Yeah, man, we come in like 3-4 times a week, Ron started. How long? What? How long have you been coming here? Each word precise as a blade. 6 months, maybe? 7? And in 6 months nobody told you the rules? Santana finally turned back to them. Nobody mentioned that people who work here are protected? That this bar operates under certain agreements? Ron's face cycled through expressions, confusion, realization, fear. We heard stories, but we thought. You thought stories were just stories. Santana nodded slowly. Let me tell you a real story then. About 3 years ago, a man came into this bar. Regular. Like you. 10 months he'd been drinking here. One night, he grabbed the bartender's girlfriend. Just grabbed her. Didn't even get as far as you did. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Nobody's seen him since. Not at this bar. Not at the bar down the street. Not at his apartment, his job, his mother's house. Another pause. You know why? Neither Ron nor Melvin answered. Because some lessons don't need teaching twice. They need teaching once, so thoroughly that everyone who hears about it learns from someone else's mistake. Leo's hand tightened on the rag, knuckles going white again. Now, Santana continued, voice dropping even lower. I'm going to give you both a choice, not because you deserve one, but because he nodded toward April, might not want to watch what happens if you choose wrong. April's pulse hammered in her throat. This was the part she'd been warned about, but hadn't fully believed. The part where protection meant consequences, where safety had a cost someone else paid. The choice is simple, Santana said. You can kneel, here, in front of everyone who watched you put your hands on her. You can apologize, mean it, and then you can leave and never come back to any establishment I protect. Or, Melvin's voice barely qualified as a whisper. Santana's smile didn't reach his eyes. Or we have a different conversation, somewhere private, and you learn why people tell stories about this place. Ron looked at Melvin. Melvin looked at the floor. Neither man moved for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds. 10 seconds where the jukebox transitioned from the Eagles to something by Fleetwood Mac, where ice continued melting in abandoned glasses, where April's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. We'll kneel, Ron said finally, voice scraped raw. We'll apologize. Santana stepped back, giving them space, giving them stage. Ron dropped first, knees hitting hardwood with a dull thud that echoed through the silent bar. Melvin followed a beat later, more slowly, like his body was fighting the command even as his survival instincts overrode pride. They knelt side by side, 3 feet from where April still leaned against the wall, close enough that she could see the sweat beading on Ron's forehead, the way Melvin's hands shook where they rested on his thighs. Look at her, Santana said. Not the floor. Her. Both men raised their eyes. The shame on their faces was palpable, thick enough to taste. But underneath it, April saw something else: resentment. The humiliation would fester, she realized. They'd leave here hating not themselves for what they'd done, but her for what she'd cost them. I'm sorry. Ron's words came out mechanical, rehearsed. I shouldn't have touched you. I shouldn't have. Mean it, Santana interrupted. Or we move to option 2. Ron swallowed hard. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. I'm sorry, really. We got drunk and stupid, and I'm sorry. His eyes glistened. Though whether from genuine remorse or fear, April couldn't tell, didn't care. Melvin's apology came quieter. I'm sorry too, for scaring you, for putting my hands on you, for... He trailed off, unable or unwilling to list every violation. April said nothing. Her throat was too tight, emotions warring inside her chest, relief, vindication, anger that this was necessary at all, fear of what would have happened without that phone call. April. Santana's voice pulled her attention. Do you accept their apology? The question surprised her. She'd expected him to dismiss them, to handle everything without her input. But he stood there, waiting, giving her agency in a situation that had stripped her of it. She looked at Ron and Melvin, really looked at them, saw them not as the terrifying force they'd been 10 minutes ago, but as pathetic men whose power existed only in the absence of consequences. Men who'd done this before would have done worse tonight and would do it again to someone without protection. No, she said clearly. But I want them gone, more than I want to hear them grovel. Santana nodded once, almost approvingly. Stand up, both of you. They scrambled to their feet with none of the swagger they'd entered with. You have 30 seconds to walk out that door, Santana said. If I see either of you within 5 blocks of this bar, any bar I protect, any business I have interest in, you won't get another choice. You won't get a warning. You'll just disappear into the kind of story people tell to scare people like you. Ron moved first, practically stumbling toward the exit. Melvin followed, shoulder-checking the doorframe in his haste. The door swung shut behind them, cutting off the sound of their retreat. The bar exhaled collectively. Conversations didn't resume immediately. People shifted in their seats, exchanged glances, processed what they'd witnessed. The couple with the phone stood up, dropped cash on their table without counting it, and left quickly. Witnesses, April realized, who didn't want to be remembered. Leo finally moved, setting down his rag and pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. He slid it across the bar toward Santana, who ignored it, and then poured a second glass, this one with ice and Coke, and gestured toward April. She crossed to the bar on unsteady legs, accepting the drink with hands that trembled slightly. The cold glass anchored her, gave her something physical to focus on. You okay? Leo asked, and it was the first thing anyone besides Santana had said to her since the assault began. Getting there, April managed. Santana remained in the center of the bar, a fixed point around which everything else orbited. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. Orders being given, April assumed, making sure Ron and Melvin's banishment stuck. You did good, he said to April, voice still quiet but lacking the edge it had held moments ago. Calling when you did, not waiting to see if it would get worse. I remembered what Eddie told me, April said. First day. What exactly did Eddie tell you? Santana moved closer, taking the stool beside her, not crowding, just present. April took a sip of her drink, letting the sweetness cut through the adrenaline taste in her mouth. He said this bar had been in his family for 40 years, that his father opened it, his uncle ran it, and now he's kept it going. He said in all that time, they never had serious trouble because they understood something important, which was that protection isn't free, that operating in certain neighborhoods, serving certain crowds, you either align yourself with structure or you become a target. She met Santana's eyes. He said he'd made an arrangement years ago, that everyone who worked here was covered under that arrangement, that if anything ever happened, there was a number to call, and you believed him. I did my research first, April admitted. Asked around. Heard the stories, the man who disappeared 3 years ago, the group of college kids who tried to rob the register and ended up in the hospital, the dealer who thought he could operate out of the back room. She rotated the glass in her hands. Everyone said the same thing. This bar is untouchable. The people who work here are untouchable. Because of you. Santana's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. You weren't scared? Knowing what that protection meant? I was terrified, April said honestly, but more scared of working somewhere without it. More scared of what happens to waitresses who don't have someone to call. She thought of the other jobs she'd worked. The hands that had grabbed and groped. The managers who'd shrugged and said, that's just how it is. the tips she'd sacrificed by refusing advances. At least here, the rules are clear. The rules are very clear, Santana agreed. Nobody touches my people. Nobody threatens my establishments. Nobody forgets who holds power here. The bar's ambient noise gradually returned, conversations resuming in hushed tones, glasses clinking against wood, the jukebox cycling to the next song. But the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. April could feel it in the way patrons glanced toward her and Santana, in the careful distance people maintained, in the respect that replaced casual indifference. She was no longer just the new waitress. She was under protection, marked, claimed by association. "How's your arm?" Santana asked, nodding toward where she still cradled her right shoulder. "Sore. I'll ice it when I get home." "Ice it now." He gestured to Leo, who immediately filled a towel with ice from the bin behind the bar. "You're done for tonight. I'll make sure you're paid for the full shift." April accepted the makeshift ice pack, pressing it against her shoulder. The cold bit through her shirt, sharp and clarifying. "I can finish. You're done," Santana repeated, gentler but final. "Go home. Rest. Come back tomorrow if you want to. Or don't. Your choice." The offer surprised her. "You're saying I can quit, after all this?" "I'm saying you have a choice. Always." He stood, adjusting his jacket. "What happened tonight wasn't your fault. If you want to keep working here, you work here. If this scared you too much, I understand. Either way, you're still protected. The arrangement doesn't end because you change jobs." April studied him, trying to reconcile the man who just offered Ron and Melvin a choice between public humiliation and private violence, with the one now giving her genuine autonomy. "You meant what you said, about your people." "Every word." Santana pulled out his phone again, checked something, then looked back at her. "I protect what's mine. This bar is mine. The people who work here are mine. That's not ownership, it's responsibility. Big difference." "And if I'd called 5 minutes later? 10? The question emerged before April could stop it, the what-ifs that had been circling since the moment Ron first grabbed her. Santana's expression darkened. "Then I would have walked in on something worse, and Ron and Melvin would have faced option 2 regardless of what they chose. Timing matters, but outcome is what I care about. You're safe. They're gone. The message is sent." "What message?" "That this bar remembers. That every regular, every drunk who thinks he's bulletproof, every asshole who confuses hospitality with invitation, they all remember what happens when lines get crossed." He gestured around the room. "Look at them. Look at how they're looking at you." April did. The remaining patrons watched her with something between wariness and respect. The man by the window who'd been waiting for Santana raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. A woman in the corner booth, mid-40s with tired eyes, nodded once solidarity, recognition, relief that someone had finally faced consequences. "They're not scared of you," Santana continued. "They're scared of what touching you would cost them. There's a difference. Fear of you is personal. Fear of consequences is structural." "Is that what you want? People scared of consequences?" "I want people to behave. Fear of consequences makes people behave when morality doesn't." Santana pocketed his phone. "You think Ron and Melvin stopped because they suddenly developed conscience? Or because they realized their actions had a cost they weren't willing to pay?" April knew the answer. Had seen it in their faces when they'd knelt, not remorse, but calculation. The weighing of pride against survival. 3 weeks ago, when I started, April said slowly, "Eddie gave me your number. Told me to memorize it, not save it. Said if I ever saved it under your name, I should save it under just the initial. Why? Plausible deniability. If someone gets hold of your phone, scrolls through your contacts, they see, could be anyone. Marcus, Michael, Mom." Santana's mouth quirked slightly. "Learned that from someone who didn't take the precaution. Her ex found my full name and number. Caused complications." "What kind of complications?" "The kind where jealous ex-boyfriends think they can intimidate me into staying away from their women." The way he said it suggested the complications hadn't ended well for the ex-boyfriend. "Now everyone who has my number knows the protocol. First initial only. Memorize it. Only call when you have to." "How many people have your number?" April asked, curiosity overriding caution. "Enough." Santana didn't elaborate. "Every business I protect, key staff members get it. Managers, senior bartenders, security. People who might need immediate response." His eyes met hers. "Usually they work up to it. 6 months, a year, Prove they're reliable. You got it on day one, because Eddie vouched for me. Because Eddie told me you needed the job badly enough to take night shifts in a bar like this. Because he said you had a kid at home depending on your income. Because he said you wouldn't call unless you really needed help. Santana tilted his head slightly. Was he right? April thought about the moment she'd dialed Ron's arm, crushing her throat, Melvin's whispered threats, the certainty that it would escalate beyond intimidation. She'd held out as long as she could, hoping someone else would intervene, hoping they'd get bored and leave her alone, hoping right up until hope ran out. Yes, she said quietly. He was right. Then you used it correctly. That number isn't for minor disputes or drunk customers who get handsy but back off. It's for exactly what happened tonight, situations where you've lost control and need power restored. He checked his watch, an expensive piece that caught the bar's lighting. Speaking of which, I have another stop to make. Territory doesn't manage itself. Before you go, April said quickly. What happens now? To Ron and Melvin, I mean. They apologized. They left. Does it end there? Santana's smile was colder this time, lacking even the slight warmth from moments ago. They apologized and left because I gave them the option. But you think I'm just going to trust they'll stay away? That humiliation is enough to guarantee they won't try something stupid out of revenge. April's stomach tightened. You're going to do something else. I'm going to make sure they understand that leaving this bar was step one, not the finale. April watched Santana head toward the exit, his departure as measured as his entrance had been. But before he reached the door, it swung open, and two men stepped inside. Not customers, not lost. These men moved with purpose, scanning the room with professional efficiency before their eyes landed on Santana. The first was tall, lean, with dark skin, and a hoodie pulled low despite the bar's warmth. The second was broader, built like someone who'd spent years moving heavy things, his shaved head reflecting the amber lights. Both wore the same expression of controlled readiness. April had seen on Santana's face the look of men who'd learned to be still before they were fast. Clear? Santana asked without preamble. 2 blocks north, the tall one reported, voice low. Sitting in a Civic. Silver. They're talking. About? Coming back. Bringing friends. The broader one shifted his weight. The one called Melvin made 3 calls. We couldn't hear everything, but he used the words disrespected and needs to pay a lot. Santana's jaw tightened imperceptibly. How many friends? Sounded like 4, maybe 5. He's calling in his crew. April's chest constricted. The relief she'd felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by cold dread. They were coming back. With reinforcements. Because humiliation wasn't enough now, it was about pride, about retribution, about proving they couldn't be pushed around even by someone like Santana. When? Santana asked. Melvin said to give him an hour. Let things calm down, then roll up. Santana nodded once, processing. His posture didn't change, his expression didn't shift. But April sensed the gears turning, strategy forming, contingencies being calculated. All right. Here's what happens. Jules, he addressed the tall one. I want eyes on that Civic. They move. You move. Don't engage. Just track. Text me every location change. Jules nodded and disappeared back through the door. Travis, Santana continued, turning to the broader man. Get everyone you can to the Civic's location. I want a perimeter. Nobody in, nobody out. When I give the word, we have a conversation with Ron and Melvin about the consequences of thinking revenge is an option. How many you want? 6 should do it. Make sure Diego's there. He's good at de-escalation when it needs to happen, and escalation when it doesn't. Travis pulled out his phone, already texting as he backed toward the exit. On it. The door closed, leaving Santana alone in the entrance. He stood there for a moment, silhouetted against the streetlights beyond, then turned back toward the bar. His eyes found April immediately. You heard that, he said, crossing back to where she sat. They're coming back. April's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Because of me. Because of them, Santana corrected sharply. Because they can't handle being held accountable. Because they'd rather escalate than accept they were wrong. He pulled out the stool beside her again, sitting this time with his full attention on her. This isn't your fault. Don't make the mistake of claiming their choices. But if I hadn't called, then you'd be in an alley right now, or a hospital, or worse. The bluntness of his words cut through her spiraling thoughts. You think I'd prefer that alternative? You think letting them finish what they started would have somehow avoided this? April pressed the ice pack harder against her shoulder, needing the physical sensation to anchor her. I didn't think it would lead to this, to more violence. It always leads to more, Santana said, voice gentler now but no less serious. Men like Ron and Melvin, they don't stop at one violation. They escalate. They test boundaries. And when nobody stops them, they push further. You called before it got worse tonight. But this? He gestured vaguely toward where his men had stood. This was always coming. If not with you, then with the next waitress. The next woman who said no. Leo approached cautiously, refilling April's Coke without asking. His hands were steadier now, but his eyes kept darting to Santana, to the door, to April. You want me to close early? He asked Santana. Get everyone out? No. Keep operating normally. I don't want Ron and Melvin knowing we know they're planning something. Let them think they have the element of surprise. Santana checked his phone, a text from Jules with a location pin. Perfect. They haven't moved yet. What are you going to do to them? April asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Santana studied her for a long moment, weighing what to share. I'm going to give them the same choice I gave them here. Apologize, mean it this time, and accept permanent banishment from my territory, or face consequences that ensure they never threaten anyone in my protection again. And if they choose wrong, then they learn why smart people don't choose wrong. The vagueness was deliberate, April realized. Plausible deniability again. The less she knew about specific methods, the less she could be implicated if things went sideways. But the implication was clear enough. Santana's world operated by rules that existed outside law, beyond courts and police and official channels. How did you end up doing this? The question emerged before April could stop it. Running protection, managing territory, being the person people call. Santana's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. Memories, perhaps, of a younger version of himself making different choices. Long story. Short version? I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs, get harassed at 2 of them, and have nobody to call when it got bad. Watched my sister get cornered in a parking lot and fight her way free because nobody was coming to help. Watched my neighborhood get eaten alive by people with power and no conscience. He paused, fingers drumming once against the bar. So I built something different. Structure where there was chaos. Consequences where there was impunity, protection for people who couldn't protect themselves. His eyes met hers. I'm not a hero, April. I do things heroes wouldn't do. But I keep people safe, actually safe, not just theoretically safe. That has value, even if it means violence. Especially if it means violence. Because the world is already violent. I just make sure it's directed at people who deserve it instead of people who don't. Santana's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, read the message, then stood smoothly. They're moving, heading back this way. April's pulse spiked. Already? I thought they said an hour. Drunk men aren't known for patience. Santana's tone remained calm, almost bored, like this was routine. Maybe it was. They've picked up 3 others. 6 total now, including Ron and Melvin. Leo dropped the glass he'd been drying. It didn't shatter, landed on the rubber mat behind the bar, but the sound cut through the room's ambient noise. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Everyone out, Santana said, voice carrying effortlessly across the space. Not shouting, just projecting with the confidence of someone who expected obedience. Bar's closing early. Finish your drinks in the next 2 minutes. Settle your tabs, and leave through the front, calmly. Nobody argued. The remaining patrons, maybe a dozen in total, began gathering belongings, pulling out wallets, moving with the quick efficiency of people who recognized when to ask questions and when to just comply. The woman from the corner booth paused near April on her way out. You okay, honey? Her voice was kind, concerned, maternal. April managed a nod. Getting there. Good. You hold on to that. The woman squeezed her shoulder briefly, carefully avoiding the injured one, then headed for the exit with everyone else. Within 90 seconds, the bar had emptied except for April, Leo, and Santana. The silence felt oppressive, heavy with anticipation. Leo locked the front door after the last patron left, then turned back to Santana. You want me gone too? He asked. Your choice. You stay. You might see things you can't unsee. You go. Nobody questions you about what happened here tonight. Leo hesitated, torn between self-preservation and loyalty. His eyes moved to April. She's staying? She's staying, April answered, before Santana could. They came back because of me. I'm not hiding. Then I'm staying too, Leo said, though his voice wavered slightly. Someone needs to witness. Make sure things don't go too far. Santana's expression suggested things would go exactly as far as they needed to, regardless of witnesses, but he didn't argue. Instead, he moved to the bar's front window, peering through the blinds at the street beyond. April joined him, careful to stay back from the glass. Do you see them? Not yet, but they're close. He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. My people are in position. 3 cars, 15 men total. Ron and Melvin's crew won't make it through the door. 15? April's eyes widened. For 6 guys? Overwhelming force prevents escalation, Santana explained, without looking away from the window. If it's 6 against 6, it's a fight. If it's 6 against 15, it's a surrender. Less blood this way usually. The word usually hung in the air like smoke. Headlights appeared at the end of the block. A silver Civic, just as described, moving slowly. Behind it, a black SUV with tinted windows. The vehicles crawled forward, predatory, like sharks circling. There, Santana said quietly. April's breath caught. Through the window, she could make out shapes in the vehicles, heads, shoulders, the occasional gesture as they talked among themselves. Planning, psyching themselves up. The Civic stopped across the street, 50 feet from the bar's entrance. The SUV pulled alongside it. Doors began opening. Ron emerged first from the Civic's passenger side, visibly drunk, stumbling slightly before catching himself on the door. Melvin climbed out from the driver's side, steadier but with a wild look in his eyes that suggested either courage from alcohol or desperation from humiliation. 4 others piled out of the SUV, young men, early 20s, wearing matching gym clothes like they'd come straight from working out, or from somewhere they wanted people to think they'd been working out. Muscle for hire, April realized. Friends doing a favor, or maybe just guys excited for the prospect of violence. 6 against 1 waitress, Santana murmured. Brave men. Ron pulled something from his jacket, a tire iron, the metal glinting under streetlights. One of the guys from the SUV had a baseball bat. Another, a length of chain wrapped around his fist. April's stomach dropped. They're armed. So are my people. Santana's thumb moved across his phone screen, sending the signal. From seemingly nowhere, men appeared. 3 emerged from the alley beside the bar. 4 came from parked cars April hadn't noticed. 2 more stepped out from the shadows of the building across the street. They moved in coordinated silence, forming a loose perimeter around Ron and Melvin's group before anyone registered what was happening. Recognition hit Ron first. April saw it through the window, his posture changing from aggressive swagger to confused alertness. He turned, saw men on all sides, and his grip on the tire iron tightened. What the hell? His voice carried through the glass, though April couldn't make out the rest. Melvin spun in a circle, counting opponents, doing math that didn't add up favorably. Ron. Man, we should. Too late, Santana said, already moving toward the door. Stay inside, he told April. Lock this behind me. Don't open it unless I tell you to. Wait. April reached for him without thinking, her hand catching his jacket sleeve. What are you going to do? Santana looked at her hand, then at her face. Something in his expression softened microscopically. I'm going to give them one more chance to make the right choice. After that, he gently extracted his sleeve from her grip. After that, it's not your concern. It became my concern when they put their hands on me. And it became mine when you called my number. His voice was firm, final. This is what protection looks like, April. It's not always pretty. It's not always comfortable, but it works. Trust that. He opened the door, and cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of asphalt and tension. Leo moved immediately to lock it behind him, his hands shaking as he slid the deadbolt home. Through the window, April watched Santana walk toward Ron and Melvin's group, with the same measured pace he'd used entering the bar earlier. Unhurried, inevitable, his men maintained their positions, boxing in the 6 who'd come for revenge. Ron raised the tire iron defensively. Stay back, man. I'm warning you. Santana stopped 15 feet from Ron, hands visible at his sides, posture relaxed. From inside the bar, April pressed closer to the window, Leo beside her, both of them holding their breath. Warning me? Santana's voice carried clearly through the quiet street. That's interesting. You came back to my establishment, with weapons, with reinforcements. Planning to do what exactly? Ron's face flushed red, visible even in the streetlight's amber glow. You humiliated us, made us kneel like we're nothing." "You are nothing," Santana replied, the words delivered without heat or malice, just fact. "You assaulted a woman under my protection. You ignored her when she told you to stop. When I gave you a choice between humiliation and worse, you chose humiliation. Then you chose to come back. That makes you not just nothing, it makes you stupid." One of the younger guys from the SUV, tall, with a snapback worn backward, stepped forward, bat resting on his shoulder. "You don't talk to my boys like that. I don't care who you think you are." "Your boys?" Santana's gaze shifted to the newcomer. "What's your name? Why? You gonna put me on a list?" "Something like that. But mostly I want to know what to call you when I explain to your mother why you're in a hospital bed." Santana took one step forward. "Just one. Last chance. Walk away now and this ends. Stay and you're complicit in whatever happens next." The young man glanced at Ron, then at Melvin, uncertainty flickering across his face. His friends from the SUV exchanged looks, the kind of silent communication that happened when a plan started falling apart. "We're not scared of you," Ron declared, though his voice cracked halfway through. "There's 6 of us." Santana smiled. It wasn't warm. "Travis, how many of us are there?" The broad man April had seen earlier stepped forward from the perimeter. 15 visible, another 5 you can't see, so 20 total, give or take. 20, Santana repeated, letting the number sink in. "And you brought 6, with a tire iron, a bat, and a chain, against trained men who do this professionally." He tilted his head. "Those odds work for you?" Melvin lowered his chain slightly. "Look, we wanted to scare her, send a message. We weren't gonna what? Actually hurt her?" Santana's voice sharpened. "The same way you weren't gonna hurt her when you pinned her to the wall? When you twisted her arm? When you talked about taking her to the back room?" He moved closer, eating up the distance. "You're gonna stand there and tell me you came here with weapons and friends out of concern for her well-being?" Silence, heavy and condemning. Inside the bar, April's hands curled into fists. Part of her wanted to look away, to let this play out without her witness. But another part, the part that had counted Ron's scars and memorized Melvin's face while being assaulted, needed to see this. Needed to know that consequences were real, that her call had mattered, that protection meant something. "Here's what's going to happen," Santana said, voice dropping to a register that somehow carried further than shouting. "You have 2 options. Again, because apparently the first time didn't take. We already apologized." Ron's desperation bled through. "We knelt, we said sorry, we left. And then you came back, with weapons, planning violence." Santana stopped 5 feet from Ron now, close enough that April could see Ron flinch. "So the terms have changed. Option 1, you kneel again. All 6 of you, right here in the street. You hand over every weapon. You apologize not just to April, but to everyone in my organization who had to waste their time tonight because you can't control yourselves. Then you leave. Not just this bar, this neighborhood, this entire territory. You find somewhere else to drink, work, exist. And if I ever see any of your faces again, we skip straight to option 2. The young man with the bat shifted his weight. "And option 2? Option 2 is what happens when men come at my people with weapons." Santana's hands finally moved, gesturing to the perimeter. "My men take those weapons away from you. Then they demonstrate why you shouldn't bring weapons you don't know how to use to fights you don't know how to win. You're threatening us?" Ron's voice pitched higher. "In front of witnesses? We could what?" Santana interrupted. "Call the police? Tell them you came back to assault a woman, brought weapons, and the neighborhood defended itself?" He pulled out his phone, held it up. "I've been recording this whole conversation. I have footage of you arriving with weapons. I have testimony from a bar full of people who saw you assault April earlier. So please, call the police. I'll wait." Ron's face drained of color. The tire iron trembled in his grip. One of the SUV guys dropped his end of the chain. The metal hit pavement with a clatter that echoed through the street like a gunshot. "I'm out, man. This is crazy. We were supposed to scare some girl, not go to war with the mob." "Not the mob," Santana corrected mildly. "I prefer Neighborhood Protection Service, but I appreciate the recognition." Another of the young men backed toward the SUV, then another. Within seconds, 3 of the 4 had retreated, leaving Ron and Melvin standing with one loyal friend who looked increasingly like he regretted his loyalty. "Your crew's abandoning you," Santana observed. "Still feel powerful?" Melvin's chain hit the ground. He raised his hands, palms out. Okay, Okay, you win. We'll kneel, we'll apologize, we'll leave. Just let us walk away after. That depends on the apology. Santana gestured to the pavement. On your knees. Now. Melvin dropped immediately. His remaining friend followed after a beat. Ron stood alone, tire iron still raised, pride and terror warring on his face. Ron, Melvin hissed. Just do it, man. It's over. It's not over, Ron's voice cracked. I can't. Then choose option 2, Santana said quietly. Please. Choose option 2. Let me show everyone watching what happens to men who can't let go of pride even when it's killing them. April watched Ron's face cycle through emotions, rage, humiliation, fear, calculation. His fingers tightened on the tire iron. For one horrible moment, she thought he'd actually swing it. Then his knees buckled. The tire iron clattered to the street. Ron collapsed forward, hands hitting pavement, shoulders shaking. All 3 men knelt in the street now, Ron broken and sobbing, Melvin stone-faced, the third friend looking sick to his stomach. The tire, iron, bat, and chain lay scattered around them like abandoned toys. Santana circled them slowly, his boots scraping against asphalt with each measured step. April watched from the window, her breath fogging the glass, unable to look away even as her stomach churned with complicated emotions. Satisfaction, unease, relief, guilt. Look at me, Santana commanded. 3 heads lifted. Ron's face was streaked with tears and snot, his earlier bravado completely shattered. Melvin's jaw clenched tight enough that April could see the muscle jumping even from this distance. The friend just looked young suddenly, stripped of whatever swagger had brought him here. Say her name, Santana said. Confusion rippled across their faces. The woman you assaulted. The woman you came back to hurt. Say her name. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. April, Melvin finally whispered. Louder. April. His voice carried now, bouncing off the buildings. April what? I don't know her last name. Exactly. Santana stopped pacing, standing directly in front of them. You put your hands on a woman whose name you didn't even bother to learn. You were going to hurt her again, maybe worse, and you don't even know who she is beyond the new waitress who talked back. Ron's sobbing intensified. The friend stared at the ground, shoulders hunched. April Larson, Santana said clearly. Single mother. Works 2 jobs to keep her daughter fed and housed. Takes night shifts at a bar because the tips are better, even though it means walking home alone at 2 a.m. through neighborhoods where men like you exist. His voice dropped lower, colder. That's who you decided to victimize. That's who you thought was fair game. Inside the bar, April's eyes burned. She hadn't told Santana about her daughter. Eddie must have shared it when he'd vouched for her. The detail made this more real somehow, not just an anonymous waitress being protected, but a specific woman with a specific life that these men had tried to destroy. I'm sorry, Ron choked out. April, I'm so sorry. I was drunk and stupid and… She can't hear you, Santana interrupted. But I can, and sorry isn't enough this time. Sorry was enough when you left the first time. Coming back canceled, sorry. Travis stepped forward from the perimeter, along with another man April hadn't seen before, shorter, wiry, with tattoos climbing his neck. They moved to either side of the kneeling men. Stand up, Santana ordered. They struggled to their feet, unsteady, uncertain what came next. Empty your pockets. Wallets, phones, keys, everything on the ground. They complied with shaking hands. 6 wallets hit the pavement, followed by phones and keys. One of the phones was cracked Ron's, probably from being shoved in his pocket too roughly. Santana nodded to Travis, who collected the items efficiently. He photographed each ID, typed information into his phone, then handed everything back except the phones. You get these back tomorrow, Travis said, pocketing the devices. After we've made sure there's no evidence you're planning round 3. We're not, the friend started. Shut up, Santana said almost conversationally. You lost the right to speak when you showed up with a baseball bat. He turned his attention back to Ron and Melvin. Here's how this works. You're banned from every establishment I protect. That's 43 bars, restaurants, and clubs across 5 neighborhoods. List is being texted to associates right now with your photos and descriptions. Travis held up his phone, showing that he was indeed sending mass messages. You don't work in my territory. You don't shop in my territory. You don't even drive through my territory if you can avoid it. Santana's gaze hardened. And if I hear if anyone in my organization hears that you've put hands on another woman anywhere, we won't have this conversation again. We'll just handle it. Quietly, Permanently. That's not fair, Ron whispered. Your ability to hurt people with impunity? Santana finished. Yes, that's exactly what I'm taking away. Consider it a public service. We could go to the police, Melvin said suddenly, voice desperate. Tell them you threatened us, extorted us. With what evidence? Santana gestured around. 20 witnesses say you showed up with weapons planning to assault someone. I defended my neighborhood. But sure, call the police. See which of us they believe, the men with weapons and assault on camera, or the community organizer protecting local businesses. The friend started crying. I just came because Ron said it would be quick. I didn't know I don't even know that girl. Her name is April, Santana repeated, voice sharp as a blade. And ignorance isn't innocence. You brought a bat. That's a choice. Live with it. 2 more men emerged from the shadows. April recognized Jules, the tall one from earlier. They positioned themselves on either side of Ron's group, not touching but close enough to loom. Jules and Travis are going to escort you to your vehicles, Santana explained. You're going to drive away calmly. No speeding, no dramatics, no stopping to regroup and plan something even stupider. If you deviate from a direct path out of this neighborhood, the men following you will assume hostile intent. Don't give them a reason. Someone's following us? Melvin's voice cracked. Until you're 10 miles away. Yes. Insurance policy. Santana stepped back, giving them space to move. Start walking. They moved like men walking to execution, shuffled steps, hunched shoulders, defeated. Jules and Travis flanked them, professional and silent. The group headed toward the Civic and SUV, footsteps echoing in the quiet street. April watched until they disappeared from view, engines starting, vehicles pulling away with none of the aggressive energy they'd arrived with. The remaining men on the perimeter held position for another 2 minutes, then dispersed as silently as they'd appeared. Within 5 minutes, the street looked normal again, empty, quiet, like nothing had happened. Santana returned to the bar's door, knocked twice. Leo unlocked it immediately, stepping back to let him enter. It's done, Santana said, brushing past him toward April. They're gone. They won't be back. April found her voice finally, though it came out rough. How can you be sure? Because they're cowards, and cowards fold when consequences become real. He studied her face. How are you feeling? I don't know, April admitted. Relieved? Guilty? Scared. It's not actually over. It's over, Santana assured her. I promise you that. The bar felt cavernous in its emptiness, just the 3 of them surrounded by vacant chairs and abandoned glasses, the jukebox finally silent. April realized she was still holding the ice pack, though it had long since melted, water dripping through the towel onto her shoes. Leo moved first, breaking the stillness by collecting the abandoned glasses from tables. His hands shook slightly, adrenaline wearing off, leaving behind the tremors of someone who'd witnessed violence without participating. He said nothing, just cleaned, needing the familiar routine to ground himself. Santana pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages. Photos and descriptions went out to all my contacts. Ron and Melvin are blacklisted as of... He checked the timestamp, 4 minutes ago. Anyone who serves them answers to me. 43 establishments, April repeated his earlier number. That's a lot of territory. It's enough. Santana pocketed his phone, then removed his leather jacket. Here, April blinked. What? You're shivering. He draped the jacket over her shoulders before she could protest. She was shivering, she realized. Had been for minutes without noticing. Adrenaline crash leaving her cold despite the bar's warmth. The jacket was heavy, still carrying his body heat, and smelled of leather and something else, cologne, maybe, or just him. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. Santana leaned against the bar, studying her with that same clinical precision he'd used to examine her injuries earlier. What happened tonight, the kneeling, the banishment, the threats, that's the visible part, the part people see and remember. But there's more that happens behind scenes. April's stomach tightened. Like what? Like making sure Ron and Melvin understand that banishment isn't a suggestion. Like checking in with their employers, their landlords, their regular hangouts. Like making absolutely certain they know that their lives got smaller tonight and will stay smaller unless they behave. That sounds like... April searched for the word. Control, Santana supplied. It is. Complete control over 2 men who thought they could act without consequences. Some people call it excessive. I call it effective. Leo paused his cleaning, glass frozen halfway to the bar. He was listening, April realized, cataloging this conversation the same way she'd cataloged Ron's scars and Melvin's features during the assault. Witnesses. They were all witnesses now. And me? April asked quietly. What happens to me after tonight? Santana's expression softened slightly, the most vulnerability she'd seen from him all evening. You work here under my word now. Not just Eddie's employee, but mine. Anyone who knows how this neighborhood operates will know what that means. You're protected. Absolutely. Permanently. Even if I quit? Even if you quit. He said it without hesitation. The arrangement isn't contingent on employment. It's contingent on you having been harmed while under my protection. That creates an obligation that doesn't end just because you change jobs. April pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders. Why? You don't know me. We met once before tonight, for maybe 5 minutes when Eddie introduced us, because that's how protection works. It's not transactional. I don't protect people because they pay me or because I like them personally. I protect them because they're part of my territory, and my territory means something. He paused. Also, Eddie vouched for you. He's been loyal to me for 15 years. That carries weight. What if? April hesitated, uncertain if she wanted the answer. What if someone doesn't care about your protection? Someone bigger, more dangerous than Ron and Melvin? Then it becomes my problem, not yours. Santana's voice carried absolute certainty. That's the point of protection. You don't have to worry about the what-ifs. I do. Leo finally set down the glass, crossing to where they stood. She should go home, he said to Santana. It's late. She's had a hell of a night. And staying here just means reliving it. Agreed. Santana straightened from the bar. I'll have someone drive you. I can take the bus. You'll be driven, Santana said firmly. Travis will take you. He's good people. Won't make you talk if you don't want to. As if summoned, Travis appeared at the door, must have been waiting outside. He nodded once to Santana, then to April. Whenever you're ready, ma'am. Ma'am? The formality felt surreal after everything. April looked around the bar at the wood-paneled wall where she'd been pinned. At the phone behind the bar she'd used to call for help. At the door Ron and Melvin had walked through twice tonight. This place had been just a job 4 hours ago. Now it was something else. A symbol, maybe. Or a reminder. I'll be back tomorrow, she said, surprising herself. Santana raised an eyebrow. You sure? Take a few days if you need them. I'm sure. April's voice strengthened. If I don't come back tomorrow, then they still win. They still scared me away. Just slower. Something like respect flickered across Santana's face. All right, tomorrow. But if you change your mind, I won't. She handed back the melted ice pack to Leo, who accepted it with a sad smile. Get some rest, April. Real rest, not just lying awake replaying everything. I'll try. Travis held the door open, patient and silent. April walked through it, Santana's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. The night air hit her face, cold and sharp and clarifying. The street looked normal, no evidence of what had happened here, no bloodstains or scattered weapons, just empty pavement and streetlights. Travis's car was parked half a block away, a nondescript sedan that could have belonged to anyone. The drive took 15 minutes through empty streets. Travis didn't speak except to confirm her address, hands steady on the wheel, radio playing something instrumental and forgettable. April watched the city slide past, her window-closed shops, sleeping houses, occasional late-night wanderers. When they pulled up to her building, Travis finally spoke. Manuel meant what he said, about protection. I know. No, I mean, he shifted in his seat to face her. I've worked for him 6 years, seen him protect dozens of people. He doesn't do it halfway. Once you're his, you're his. That's just how he operates. April studied Travis's face in the dashboard light, sincere, earnest, younger than she'd initially thought. Has he ever failed? To protect someone? Travis's expression darkened. Once, 3 years ago. Woman who worked at a restaurant he protected. She didn't call when she should have. By the time we found out, it was too late. The story Eddie had mentioned. The man who disappeared. What happened to him? The one who hurt her? Officially? Police never found him. Unofficially? Travis's jaw set. Manuel made sure that failure never happens again, whatever it takes. April nodded slowly, understanding the implicit message. This wasn't just business for Santana. It was personal. Every person he protected represented a chance to rewrite that failure, to prove he could keep people safe when it mattered. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight, for driving me, for all of it. Thank you for calling when you did. Makes our job easier when people don't try to handle everything themselves." April climbed out of the car, still wearing Santana's jacket. She'd return it tomorrow, another reason to show up, to not hide. Her apartment was dark and quiet when she entered. Her daughter was at her mother's for the night, a regular arrangement on late shift evenings. Part of April was grateful she needed time to process, to decompose, to figure out how to carry this forward. She stood in her bathroom, examining her reflection. The redness on her cheek had faded to pink. Her shoulder ached but moved normally. No permanent damage, at least not physically. Emotionally was harder to measure. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "This is Manuel. Travis confirmed you got home safe. If you need anything tonight, can't sleep, feel unsafe, whatever, call the number you have. Someone will answer. Always." April stared at the message for a long moment, then saved the number properly this time. Not just Manuel Santana, with his full name, because hiding it felt pointless now. She was in this world, whether she'd chosen it or not. She texted back, "Thank you. For everything." His response came quickly. "You called at the right time. That took courage. Don't forget that." April set her phone down and sat on her bed, Santana's jacket still around her shoulders. Tomorrow she'd go back to the bar. She'd serve drinks and take orders and smile at customers. But she'd do it differently now, not as someone hoping to avoid trouble, but as someone who knew what protection meant. The bar would return to normal operations. Regulars would come and go. Music would play, glasses would clink, conversations would flow. But underneath the surface, everyone would remember the night April Larson called for help, and help came with overwhelming force. Some people would call it extreme, others would call it justice. April called it survival. She lay back on her bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was simple. Tomorrow, she'd walk into that bar with her head high. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear without protection was dangerous, and she wasn't alone anymore. The city hummed beyond her window, endless and indifferent and full of people like Ron and Melvin, who thought they could take without consequence. But it was also full of people like Manuel Santana, who'd built something different, something structured and brutal and strangely honest. Protection wasn't clean. It wasn't legal. It wasn't what heroes offered in stories, but it worked. And for tonight, that was enough. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.